Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We're reading Among the Hidden, and we're on page 84. So, we've gotten to learn a little bit more about Jen. We've learned a little bit more about what is this population law and why was it put into effect. And we've also learned that Luke is pretty sure Jen is completely crazy. But there's this thing about this rally she keeps bringing up. So, let's find out more about that now. Chapter 18. Luke said he couldn't look at Jen's triumphant grin. He thought about how terrifying it was just running back and forth between his house and Jen's. Even this morning on his third run through their yards, his heart had pounded so hard he'd wonder if it had burst from fear. And in the yard, at least, he was sure as he could be, that no one was watching. How could Jen think he would dare go out in public where he knew people could see him? People in government, no less, and say, "I'm a third child. I want to be treated just like everybody else." "Scared?" Jen said softly. Luke could only nod. Jen turned back to the computer. "Well, I am too," she said matter-of-factly. She typed something, then looked back at Luke. "Some. But don't you think it'll be a relief? No more hiding, no more pretending, just being free?" Luke wondered if he'd always misunderstood the meaning of the word relief. Jen's rally sounded like his worst nightmare. You can think about it," she said. "You don't have to decide anything today. Now, ready to chat?" Luke looked back at the computer screen where rows of words were unfurling. "Carlos, it's 1:05 here. My parents think it's a waste to run the AC during the day. Can you say heartless?" "Sean, why don't you just crank it up, then turn it off again right before they get home? That's what Pat and I do. They'll never know." "Carlos, yeah, but my parents probably read their electric bill." "Yolanda, so what are they going to do, ground you?" "Carlos, good point. I'm searching for the temp control right now." "Yolanda, where's Jen?" "Sean, you know she never gets up this early." "Carlos, curses. My parents have the temp control locked somehow. Told you they were evil. Where is Jen? I can't wait for her sarcastic comment." Luke read the words Jen was typing. "I'm right here, and Sean, I do get up early. I just don't always choose to see you first thing. And Carlos, what's wrong? Is there sweat in their eyes?" There's only one in R in sarcastic. She hit another key and the words appeared right up with everyone else's. They were followed quickly by another line. "Sean, good morning to you too, Jen. Glad you're still among the living." Jen clicked tightly. "No, just among the hidden. Not the same thing at all." Then she sent two. "What is this?" Luke asked. "Some sort of game?" He remembered Jen mentioning at Carlos before and never explaining who he was. There were some sort of computerized imaginary friends. Carlos, Sean, Yolanda, they're all other third children. Sean's even got a brother, Pat, who's a fourth child. This is how I talk to them. Luke watched the next line of type appear. "Carlos, thanks for the sympathy, Jen." "But how?" Luke's still doubtful. "Oh, it's the net," Jen said. "If you've got a spare hour or two sometime, I'll give you the technical gobbledygook to explain it all. All I care about is that it works. I'd die without someone to talk to." She was typing even as she talked. Luke craned his head to see what she wrote. "Guess what? The kid I told you about, Luke, is here with me." Quickly, 3 "Hi, Lukes" appeared on the screen. Luke fought down panic. "But the government," he said. "They'll find me." Jen playfully slugged his arm. "Chill, okay? Nobody from the government can get in this chat room. We all use a password. Just third children know it. And anyhow, even if someone else read this, what would they know? Just that somewhere in the world there's a kid named Luke. Big deal." "But they can trace you through the computer and then they'd find me too." Luke's heart was still pounding. "Look, if they could trace people through the computer or through this chat room, wouldn't they have found me a long time ago?" Jen asked. Luke tried to think clearly. "So your parents," he said. "You think they bribe people so you're safe, but mine—" Jen was shaking her head. "No, I'm not safe," she said grimly. "Even my parents can bribe the population police if they found me. Maybe to keep them from looking, but maybe not even that. The population police get some ridiculously big reward for every illegal they find. Why do you think I hide at all? Why do you think we have to have the rally? Everybody ought to be safe." and nobody should have to use bribes just to walk down the street or go to a mall or take a ride in a car. Luke glanced back at the computer screen where the conversation continued. How did all these people find out the password, he asked. How did you? Well, I created the chat room, so I made it up, Jen said. And I knew a couple of their shadow kids, and I got my parents and their parents to get the passwords to them. And then some of those kids spread the words to other kids they knew. Last time I counted, I had contact with 800 kids. Luke shook his head. He didn't even think his parents knew that many people. So what's the password, he asked. Free, Jen said. It's free. Chapter 19. Luke left Jen's that day with a pile of books and computer printouts clutched to his chest. Some reading material for you, she said. So you'll understand. Back in his own room, Luke sat down in his bed and opened the first book. It was thick and carried its title in ominous black letters, The Population Disaster. The type inside was small and closely spaced. Luke read a sentence at random. While debate continues over the carrying capacity of the Earth, he skipped ahead. If the total fertility rate in industrialized countries had remained at or below 2.1, Luke saw that reading this book would be like puzzling out the letters Dad got from the government. He glanced at the other two books, The Famine Years Revisited and The Population Reversal. They looked no easier. The computer printouts were at least brief, but both the problem of the shadows and the population law, our country's biggest mistake, were full of big words. Luke sighed. He was tempted to put the books aside and just ask Jen to explain them to him, and he might have, except for what she'd said as she'd begun handling them to him. Oh my gosh, I didn't think. You can read, can't you? Of course, Luke answered stiffly. I was reading in the chat room, wasn't I? Yes, but you could have been. Oh, never mind. I've offended you again, haven't I? Me and my big mouth. It wouldn't have been anything to be ashamed of, even if you couldn't. Oh, I'm making things worse. I'll shut up. Here. And it had seemed to Luke that she'd pulled even bigger books off the shelf after that. Now he resolutely turned to the beginning of the population disaster and began reading. Since some elements of the overpopulation crisis were foreseen in the 1800s, an uninformed observer could only wonder why humankind came so near to total annihilation. But Luke reached for the dictionary and settled in for the long haul. It rained the next several days, so Luke read constantly, not even tempted to race over to Jen's instead. He could hear Dad banging around downstairs, stomping in and out from the barn or the machine shed. Now that the harvest was in, Luke thought Dad might be bored without the pigs to take care of, so Luke read cautiously, always ready to shove his population book under his pillow and replace it with one of his adventure books. The preparation paid off on the fourth day when he heard Dad's footsteps on the stairs. Hey, Luke! What are you up to? Nothing, Luke said, turning Treasure Island right side up at the very last moment. Dad didn't notice. Want to play cards? They played rummy on Luke's bed. Luke could feel the corner of the population disaster poking his back throughout the entire game, and he kept wanting to ask Dad about what he was learning. He spent most of the first game biting his tongue. Dad won. Again? Dad asked, shuffling the cards. If you don't have any work to do. In November, with no livestock, only work I've got now is figuring out how we're going to pay our bills once the hog money runs out. Isn't there some way to grow stuff inside during the winter? Like down in the basement with special lights? Lots of water and extra minerals. And then you could sell it? Luke asked without thinking. He just finished reading a chapter on the population book about hydroponics. Dad squinted. Seems I did hear tell of that once. Luke won the next hand. Oops, sorry. Dad didn't seem to be concentrating. At the end, Dad said, Mind if we quit now? Luke was terrified Dad would ask where he'd heard of hydroponics, so he just said, No problem. Dad left muttering, Growing food inside. Luke wished he'd had the nerve to ask about the population law, or the famines, or even some family history. Once he got past the dense language, the book Jen had loaned him were full of revelations. As best as he could understand it, the world had simply gotten too full of people about 20 years earlier. Poor countries had it particularly bad, and people there often starved or were malnourished. But then something worse happened. Terrible droughts struck parts of the world that always grew most of the food. For 3 years, they grew almost nothing. People everywhere starved. In Luke's country, the government began rationing food, only allowing people to have 1,500 calories a day. And to make sure there was food, they seized control of all food production. They forced factories that had made junk food to crank out healthy food instead. They forced farmers to move to land that would be more likely to produce. Is that why we don't live near our grandparents? Luke wanted to ask his parents. But the government didn't think there would never again be more people than the farmers could feed. So they passed the population law too. In the evening, spooning in his stew or cutting up his meat, Luke felt pangs of guilt now. Perhaps someone was starving someplace because of him. But the food wasn't there wherever the starving people were. It was here on his plate. He ate it all. Luke, you're so quiet lately. Is everything all right? Mother asked one night when he waved away a second helping of cabbage. I'm fine, he said, and went back to eating silently. But he was worrying that maybe the government was right and that he shouldn't exist. Only when he got to the two computer printouts did he begin to feel better. One of the articles began, "The population law is evil." The other said, "Hundreds of children are hidden, mistreated, starved, neglected, abused, even murdered for no reason. Forcing children into the shadows can be counted as genocide." "How can this be?" he asked Jen a week later when he finally got a chance to go back to her house. "How can the books and the articles be so different?" She handed him a glass of soda. "What do you mean?" she asked. Luke pointed to the population disaster. "This book says the human race would have gone extinct if we hadn't had the population law. And this," he held up and shook the Problem of Shadows article, "this says the population law is totally unnecessary and cruel. It says there was plenty of food, even during the famines, except that the barons were hoarding it." Belatedly, he remembered that Jen was a baron. "Sorry." Jen shrugged, not the least bit offended. "So what's the truth?" Luke asked. Jen shook potato chips into a bowl. "Well, think about it. The government allowed those books to be published. They probably even paid for them. So of course they're going to say what the government wants them to believe. They're just propaganda. Lies. But the articles, the authors of those were probably put themselves at risk getting the information out. So they're right." Luke pondered that. "Then why'd you make me read the books?" he asked. "So you'd understand how stupid the government is," Jen said. "So you'd understand why we have to make them see the truth." Luke looked back at the stack of thick books on the Talbots' kitchen counter. They looked so official, so important. Who was to say they weren't true? Chapter 20. Luke feared he'd have to wait months between visits to Jen once the snow started, but the weather proved kind that winter. Most days were dry and clear. He didn't have leafy trees to hide behind, but he began to feel safe anyway, crawling through his and Jen's backyards. By mid-January, he could make the entire journey without his heart beating abnormally at all. The odds against someone watching him from one of the other Barron houses seemed too astronomical to worry about. His only concern was Dad. Dad was usually hung around the house a lot during the winter. Without the hogs to tend to, he could easily have been there even more than usual, preventing Luke from sneaking out. But suddenly, Dad had taken to heading to town many mornings, yelling up to Luke, "I'm going to the library. You got something up there to eat for lunch, don't you?" Or, "There's some plastic tubing over to Stylon that I want to check out. Tell the boys when they get in from school, you hear?" "That's hydroponics notion," Luke bragged to Jen one day in late January while they were sitting at the computer together. "I got Dad all excited about it, and now he's too busy with that to notice what I do." "What's hydroponics?" Jen asked. "It was in one of your books, growing plants indoors without soil, just using water and special minerals." "Oh," Jen said, "does he think the government would actually let him do it?" "I guess so. Why wouldn't they?" Jen shrugged. "Why does the government do anything?" Luke didn't have to answer that. Jen turned back to the computer at the chat room, where everyone was debating fake IDs. "Carlos says they won't buy me one until I'm 18 because she thinks the government won't challenge an adult as much, and maybe they'll be cheaper then." "Pat, maybe Sean and I will get ours by the time we're 90. Dad and Mom have been saving for them as long as we can remember." Yolanda, "My dad says he's waiting to find one that's foolproof. He says there are too many bad ones out there." Jen began typing furiously. "Who needs a fake ID, Carlos? They'll probably get you one that says John Smith, and you'd have to spend the rest of your life trying to pass for an Angelo. My parents have been begging me to get a fake IDs for years, but I won't until I can have one that says Jen Talbot, and it's really mine." "Have you all forgotten the rally? We're going to get real IDs that say who we really are. We aren't fakes. We shouldn't have to hide." She jabbed the enter button so hard the computer shook. "But Jen," Luke said timidly, I thought you used a fake ID to go shopping with your mom. It said you were her niece. Jen turned her fierce gaze to Luke. No, that was just a shopping pass, she said. I don't like using that either. But I figured I can't fight my parents about everything. What they're talking about, she pointed at the computer screen, is taking on a fake identity permanently. Most shadow kids do that eventually. They go live with another family and pretend to be someone they aren't for the rest of their lives. So you'd rather hide? Luke asked. He thought about using a different name, living in a different family, being a different person. He couldn't imagine it. No, of course I wouldn't rather hide, Jen said irritably. But getting one of those IDs, that's just a different way of hiding. I want to be me and go about like anybody else. There's no compromise, which is why I've got to convince these idiots that the rally is their only chance. There was a shocked blankness on the computer screen after Jen's entry. Then Carlos ventured. Jen, got any of your parents' blood pressure medicine handy? Sounds like you need it. And that's where we'll end for today. So, until next time, have a great day, guys.